"We need to discuss, honey," she stated in a stern but hesitant tone. She was a few feet distant, her hands on her hips in that familiar position that shouted resolve and impatience. I took a moment to gaze up. Rather, I let her to stand there, transferring her weight between the 2 feet. Each bite of the steak I had just grilled for myself was slow and purposeful as I proceeded to eat it casually. I was aware of her previous location. She might think she was subtle, but I had figured it all out months ago. She would go to these so-called nights out with the girlfriends every night. It took me a while to look up and raise an eyebrow. "Is it truly necessary?" With a little smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth, I asked in a flat tone. She began to fidget more and more. When I didn't give her the response she was hoping for, she detested it. She said the words in a single, hurried breath. "I'm not happy." She folded her arms, as if preparing for a blow. "I believe that something needs to change with us and our marriage. Something has to be done about it." I laughed quietly as I reclined in my chair. "Now do we?" With faux wonder in my voice I answered. I cocked my head, allowing her uneasiness to linger. "What specifically do you suggest we do? Tell me." Like a thundercloud, the tension hovered between us. The more I refused to take her seriously, the more frustrated she became. However, I had had enough of being the naive husband. Did she want to talk? All right. However, it was not going to proceed as she had anticipated. In order to make ends meet, I had been working non-stop at the mill for the past 20 years, often working double shifts in addition to overnight duties. To put food on the table, maintain a roof over our heads, and provide our children the opportunities they never had, I worked more than I ever imagined was humanly possible. While ensuring that my wife, Rebecca, could remain at home and raise our son and daughter as she had always stated, I was also able to pay for their college educations. All of that apparently didn't matter much anymore. She stumbled with her words as if she were worried they may slip and fall, but she added, "I just think it would be good for both of us to maybe expand our horizons a little." I took another mouthful of steak, the corners of my mouth pulling up into a smirk as the blood pooled on the plate precisely the way I liked it, almost mooing. "Do you mean enrolling in a class in basket weaving or something?" The sound of my laughter was low and humorless, and I almost choked on the bite I was chewing. Rebecca did not recoil when she flushed. "Well, not exactly," she muttered, her voice a little less blustery than before. She began to approach, as if she believed it might lessen the impact. The slight scent of cheap wine drifted toward me as she leaned forward. After a night out with the girls, she submitted her signature, but this time there was something extra underneath it. I immediately recognized the harsh, unmistakable fragrance. It was expected. No more. She stood close enough for me to see the gleam of remorse in her eyes, despite her determined efforts to hide it. I wasn't going to be surprised by whatever she imagined she was going to say. Not this evening. Never again. As I continued to eat, she slid into the chair next to me and lightly touched my thigh. Pretending not to notice, I was more thinking of something enjoyable. With a light, almost playful tone, she stated something exciting, possibly even kinky. "Kinky?" "Oh," I said in a neutral tone of voice. "Like skydiving." "Do you mean?" I couldn't help but smirk as I asked. A little less subtly now, she raised her palm in a nervous laugh. As her hand moved toward my lap, she softened her voice and murmured, "No, not like that." Something wild was going through my mind. "Sexually, you know?" I put down my fork and raised an eyebrow at her. "In a sexual sense?" I repeated while pretending to be perplexed. "Are you saying that you're at last prepared to explore different roles?" She drew back a little, her face contorted in disdain. No. She shook her head in exclamation. "Then what?" Leaning back and folding my arms, I waited for her to spit it out before I asked. After a little pause, she leaned in closer. Her hand started moving purposefully again. "I mean," she added, lowering her voice to almost a whisper. "How do you feel about us getting married?" The thought of dating someone new, perhaps younger, would be appealing, wouldn't it? I gave her a long look while I allowed the impact of what she had said to sink in. Then I answered, "Sure," with a composure that even shocked me. "With the exception of one small, annoying detail," she said in a cheerful voice. "You wouldn't even have to wear a protection, as if that would make the bargain sweeter." I put down my fork and gave her a direct look. "That isn't the problem," I remarked coolly. "Our wedding vows, that is. That part where I said I would forsake everyone else? In front of God, our family, and our friends? I couldn't possibly be unfaithful, can I? That would make me what kind of person?" She laughed, but it was a forced, hollow chuckle. "Oh, honey," she waved her hand dismissively. "It's just sex, it's not very important. It wouldn't bother me." "Well," I said confidently I would. Her hand, which had been moving gradually across my lap, came to a sudden stop. In any case, it wasn't helping her. Her face lit up with frustration as she leaned back. Why must you be such a stick in the mud all the time? She lost her temper. Every time I offer something fresh, enjoyable, and thrilling, you reject it. You know we're not getting any younger. We will lose our chance if we do not begin to live today. Well, I answered, stopping to eat another steak mouthful. It's up to you if you decide to renege on the commitment you made to each of those individuals. However, I will not participate in it. Her face changed, and suddenly her hand returned to its previous investigation. Do you imply that even if you're not having fun, you'd still be cool with me having fun? With a gentle, almost optimistic tone. She inquired. I carefully examined the last piece of steak on my plate before putting it in my mouth. Then, with purposeful composure, with the steak knife poised between her eyes, I aimed it straight at her. You believe that you can make me a cuck? My voice was icy and low as I asked. The tension in the air between us caused her hand to freeze once more. Unexpectedly, she blinked. Me? I was just thinking it might spice things up for us, she stumbled, her voice losing the assurance she had before displayed. I leaned back in my chair and gave her a pointed look. You know our sex life has been, well, pretty much dead for a while now. It has. And who is to blame for that? Mine? Not in my opinion. Rebecca, I am aware of what you have been doing. Her face went white. What are you saying? Her voice was hardly more than a whisper as she stumbled. With a scathing and uncompromising tone, I said, I am well aware of your so-called girls' nights out. I am aware of the men you have been slinking off with, the ones you have cheated on in a dirty alley, in a shady hotel room, in their cars, and even in the back room of the bar. Really, Rebecca, are there any standards remaining for you? Her expression was almost hilarious, and her mouth dropped so much that it nearly struck the table. Her eyes appeared to be about to jump out of her skull due to their wide and bugged-out appearance. What are you discussing? She spluttered. None of those things were done by me. I sighed and gently shook my head, as though her denial was nearly too absurd to be believed. Rebecca, really? Will you really act as though you didn't do this in order to disparage my intelligence? Indeed. She lost her temper. She crossed her arms in defiance, her voice rising. I took no action. I sighed slowly and deliberately, shook my head, once more, and gestured to the pendant hanging from her necklace. Remember when I handed that jewelry to you? With a calm yet direct tone, I asked. She paused, obviously uncertain of the direction of this. After a beat, she responded, Yeah, what is there to do with our most recent anniversary? I leaned forward just enough to meet her gaze. Isn't that about when you started going out with your girlfriends? For a moment, her face faltered. Well, I suppose so, she said cautiously. And you didn't think that necklace was out of the ordinary? I nodded in response to the question. As if seeing it for the first time, she snatched up the pendant, held it in front of her, and tipped it from side to side. What are you discussing? She inquired, clearly perplexed. I grinned and leaned back. It's incredible, I said. I spoke in a mockingly nostalgic tone. In my lifetime, technology has advanced significantly. I recall the days when video cameras were really heavy. Do you recall that? As she gradually began to grasp what I was expressing, her face turned pale and her mind began to race. Rebecca narrowed her eyes and tilted her head, as though she was trying to determine if I was crazy. Anyway, I went on. I spoke in a casual tone. These days they produce amazing cameras. One is so little that it can fit within a pendant necklace. Crazy, huh? As the impact of what I had spoken sunk in, her expression changed. Her confidence evaporated in front of my eyes as the color left her face. It was like seeing her vanish into thin air. I continued each night after your little excursions, relishing the experience. I would wait until you fell asleep or, as you like to say, passed out. After that, I would get your necklace from the dresser, download the most recent video, and watch it through to the end. I would occasionally edit together the greatest passages. And here's the worst part. I bent over. I lowered my voice to a whisper. I posted everything to my preferred hot website. Congratulations, my love. You're a celebrity. I swear I didn't think her face could get any paler, but I was mistaken as her eyes widened in panic. She appeared almost translucent, like a ghost. I smiled icily and said, Don't worry, love, I made every video private. I am the only one who can see them. With a flick of my wrist, I retrieved a manila envelope from the garbage beside me. I flung it toward her on the table. It thumped dully to the ground. These were written approximately a week ago by my lawyer. I crossed my arms and leaned back as I spoke. I simply waited for the appropriate time to give them to them. Would you not be aware of it? The timing feels ideal right now. Her hands were shaking as she attempted to steady herself, and she was already trembling. Tears gathered in her eyes and flowed in crooked rivers down her cheeks. She seemed to be having trouble breathing, as seen by the faint gasps she made. I won't tell lies. I spoke in a calm, almost impersonal tone. This divorce's terms are unfair. You're receiving a lot less than you would have if you choose to oppose it. Before proceeding, I took a minute to let the impact of what I had spoken to sink in. I don't mean to come across as rude, but you've given me no other option, I continued, pushing forward a little. The videos that I have posted will be made public if you do not agree to these terms. To all of you. Your friends, family, and workplace. Every person you've ever met. And I promise to make sure they all receive the links, Rebecca. Her poise crumbled entirely. It was the most complete breakdown I've ever witnessed. She seemed to practically melt in front of my eyes, her shoulders hunching and body trembling as she turned into a pool of tears and hushed screams. It goes without saying that Rebecca agreed to my requirements. And we were able to complete a divorce that was peaceful and devoid of drama. She is a waitress for the first time in her adult life. At the same bar where she used to revel in her adventures, no less. She must find that awkward. For my part, I've never been more content. I go out more, work less, and I recently met this amazing woman who truly seems to value me for who I am. She turned to me with that lovely, familiar face only the other day when we were relaxing on the couch after supper. We need to discuss, honey, she added in a soft voice. With some tension beginning to build, I couldn't help but sigh. I automatically prepared myself since I had been so conditioned to anticipate challenging conversations. What is it? I asked, already bracing myself for the next bit of information. She simply gave me a nice grin without answering right away. She reached out to take my hand and gave it a comforting squeeze as her eyes softened. Her voice was full of emotion as she added, I just want to tell you how much I love you and how much you mean to me. You help me feel valued and seen for who I truly am. Never in my life have I felt so loved. I blinked, momentarily surprised, but any tension was instantly relieved by the warmth in her words. My face lit up with a smile that I couldn't help but smile. Now that I added in a lighter, more sincere tone, is a conversation worth having, and everything seemed good at that precise moment. Pure, unadulterated love, no more doubt, no more ulterior motives. Please leave your opinions in the space provided for comments below, dear listeners. Additionally, remember to subscribe, like, and share.